Technology is ready. Call the meeting to order.
Thank you, Worship. First item is a presentation.
Second.
Items to the agenda?
Yep, just a second.
Clerk apologizes, does not normally do the council committee meeting. It's already on the fly.
This is still a relatively new procedure, and so I'm going to open the floor to items to be added to the end of the agenda. Mr. Councillor Nichols.
Leaves and by-elections.
Okay. Councillor Hodge.
Riverview?
Oh, I was going to, I guess that you can bring up the same things
I don't know. We'll talk. Oh, no, I thought yours is close.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Mr.
Thank you, Worship. Our first item is a presentation by Ms. McLeod and contains the 2012 annual report.
Everybody got a copy of their annual report? So good afternoon, and I'm really happy to be here because this particular meeting signals the end of 2012 for the Finance Department. So this presentation, along with the DCC report and the Statement of Financial Information report that are a little later on the agenda, signal the end of the statutory reporting requirements for 2012 for the city. So I hope everybody brought their copy and you've had a chance to look at this. As in the past, our annual report this year has been divided into three parts. We have one section that is the financial statements, one that is all of our accomplishments related to our strategic goals, and one that is a quick handout for all the highlights of the year. And the reason we do that is in the long term it saves us a little bit of money to give everybody exactly what they need. Not everybody, in fact, unfortunately, a very few people want to look at these detailed financial statements, but you have to have them. Anyway, I also wanted to say that we are really pleased with how this turned out this year. This is a true team effort. You know, the Finance Department and Corporate Planning do the work that creates the content for this document, but it's our our Corporate Communications Department that does all the printing and the pictures that makes it look so nice. So we're really pleased with how it turned out.
I asked about the orange, if you want to explain.
There's no particular reason for the orange.
Councillor Reid, do you want to ask us a question? On the
Just that it's
chair?
bright orange instead of blue and white with our green.
It was anticipating the results of the last election, but it didn't turn out that way.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's a signal that we have very hot results this year.
Yes.
And we wanted you to pay attention.
You and Dan got to get
Behind
together.
it all is some serious blue.
Yes.
Because you told me it was so that we could do a bright color every year so you'd be able to pick out the year just by the color.
That's right. We like to have it bright. Okay, starting with our accomplishments related to our goals. As you know, our work plan is focused on our 5 strategic goal areas: to strengthen neighborhoods, to expand jobs and prosperity, to increase participation, enhance sustainability, and achieve excellence. And I'm happy to tell you that I think we have achieved quite a bit of excellence this year, and we have some pretty good results. So, you know, there's a lot of information in this book. If you take the skinnier book, and you turn to, say, page, I think it's 15, you can follow along with each strategic goal and look at some of the accomplishments. In the interest of time, I've picked a few, and of the few I've picked, there's some that I think are really particularly stellar, so I'm going to point those ones out to you too, because I really like them. In terms of strengthening neighborhoods, in 2012, our planning department completed our transit-oriented development strategy, which is going to set the vision of how development will proceed as SkyTrain comes to Coquitlam. That's going to be one of our biggest investments, and we want to make sure that that makes our neighborhoods as good as possible. The other thing, the next item is probably what I think is one of the best accomplishments for the year, is our Strategic Initiative Department negotiated with the province for our extra Evergreen line, or Evergreen station at Lincoln Avenue. That's sort of a huge investment in our community, and they also managed to negotiate a $7 million P3 Canada grant to help pay the way for it. So that's really a great accomplishment for the year. Also, our overall crime rate declined for the 4th year in a row, and we signed a 20-year agreement with the RCMP to make sure that we protect all those neighborhoods as we go into the future. We have a whole lot of different measurements that you can see on page 15, but the key measurement for this particular goal is perception of quality of life in the community, and 96% of our residents say the quality of life in Coquitlam is good or very good. So that's, I think, something we should be proud of. In terms of expanding jobs and prosperity, we had record levels of development activity in 2012, very similar to 2011. We issued building permits for over 1,600 new building units or housing units in the community. That's a lot of jobs, and so that's kind of what we want to see going on in the community. David Monroe, our economic development manager, had over 200 meetings with local businesses to talk about business retention and attraction and how to keep lots of businesses here in Coquitlam. And we hosted a number of different events in the community that brought outsiders in to spend their money in Coquitlam. One example is the Canadian National Women's Open Golf Tournament, so that's kind of a good thing. And our key measure for this particular initiative, which you can see on page 17, is construction values. And our construction values in 2012 were very similar to 2011, which was a record-breaking year, about 30% above our previous high. So that was good. Unfortunately, looking into 2013, it looks a little tougher at the beginning of the year. Yeah. In terms of increasing participation, we opened our new library. That's one of those ones that I think is really a stellar accomplishment. You'll notice that particular picture is on the front of our annual report this year because that's a really big event. One of the things I was thinking when I looked at that picture, though, it's just a little bit misleading because I don't think that library since the day it opened has been that empty. There's a whole lot of participation going on there. It's crowded all the time whenever I go in there. We also opened and upgraded a number of parks, Glen Pine Park, Blue Mountain Park, Mackin Park, Galloway Park, I think also Queenston Park, a number of different places. That gets the community participating. We also had a number of different festivals in the community that brought people from the outside to participate, as well as all of our neighbors. And, our Canada Day event brought in 60,000 people, and I think it's probably going to grow every year from here on. So that's a good thing. Our measure for this particular goal is how many times people participate in the week. And our survey tells us that, on average, people in Coquitlam participate in something 4 times a week. So that's what you want to see for a healthy community. Our next goal is related to enhancing sustainability of our services and infrastructure. And this year we completed the design for our new fire hall. We also have hired 16 of the 20 new firefighters that we need to create a new company up there. So that's the way we're going to sustain those services to a bigger and larger population in a different area. We also implemented a new multimodal transportation route. That's going to help us have a number of different, more sustainable transportation options for people. We continued with our energy efficiency projects, and we've reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 30%. And we also completed the comprehensive facilities assessment review, where we look at the condition of every facility, what all the components are, what their lifespans are. This is going to help us to maintain our buildings in a more efficient way and help us maximize their lifestyle. Our key measure here is taxpayer confidence, and 83% of our residents say they get good value for their tax dollars. I'm very happy about that particular one.
I think you should shout that out the door.
Achieving excellence in governance. This first one we're talking about, I think this is another one that's one of those really huge accomplishments. During 2012, we implemented some very innovative financing strategies that will really carry the city into the long term in a really good way. The bonus density system and the CAC program. So that'll help us to fund amenities, and we upgraded our DCC program to match the new strategic transportation plan. So those kind of funding mechanisms are what's going to help the city fund our infrastructure now and into the future. So that's a really good one. We also have had a low tax increase for the last 5 years. They've been decreasing every year, so that's a good thing. And we have a number of cross-departmental teams that are doing all sorts of initiatives where we get people from every area of the organization. Our carbon cutters are working on energy initiatives and energy efficiency. Our business improvements area is working on process efficiencies and what we do day to day. And, of course, Team Coquitlam is out there raising funds for various sundry charities. In addition to that, as expected, we got 3 Government Finance Officer Association awards, one for the annual report, which is the equivalent of this package that you're seeing today from last year, one for our budget book, and one for our popular recording, which are these kinds of brochures that we make available to the public. And our key measure for this is citizens' overall satisfaction with city services. And our 2012 survey told us that 94% of our residents are happy with our services. So it's all good news. Lots of good things happened during the year. And now a little bit of money. I know this is the part that people like the pictures and the colors and the accomplishments a lot more than the money part. But this is important too, and this was a really, really good year for the city. The highlights of this annual report are our assets went up, our cash balances went up, our debts went down, and every area achieved a bit of a surplus, and of course we got an unqualified audit opinion. What that means is that KPMG, our auditors, believe that these financial statements properly reflect what happened to the city in the year. So that's a good thing. So looking quickly at our balance sheet, the city ended the year with cash of $266 million. That's up $31 million from last year, the end of last year. And that cash is broken into three different sort of main parts. The first part, funds for specific purposes. That's money that we collect from people that we must spend on what they gave it to us for. That's things like our DCCs. We have to spend it on the projects that they gave us the money for. It's our deposit trust funds, like building deposits and things like that. Sometimes we spend it, sometimes we give it back to them once they've completed the work. And things like our tax and utility prepayment plans. So at the end of the year, we have a bunch of cash that's for this year's payment plans. Okay? We also have reserves for operations. Those are the kinds of things that happen every year, but how they happen might vary. Some years we have bad years, things like snow removal. Some years it snows more, some years it doesn't. So we have reserves related to those kinds of activities like insurance and tax appeals. And what happens is some years we'll spend a little less, we put it in a reserve, and other years we'll spend a little more, so that way we don't have to increase taxes to handle those difficult years. So that's those kind of reserves. We also have reserves for capital purposes. That's our land sale reserve, building replacement, equipment replacement, fire trucks, that kind of thing. The only money that the city has that's actually uncommitted to something is our accumulated surplus, and that's the little bit of surplus we've earned over all the years that the city's been in operation, so say 100 years. And that is uncommitted, and that's available if we have an emergency. But that's what it's for. It's there for emergency purposes. Looking at our capital assets, this year, at the end of the year, our asset balance was $1.67 billion. That's a lot of assets. That is the historic value of all the land and the roads and the pipes and the vehicles that we use every day to provide services to the community. And while it seems like a great thing, it's actually a bit of an expense. It's one of our challenges. If you look at those assets, the bottom four total about $900 million, and all of those assets are depreciable. In other words, they wear out over time. And so we have to be prepared to maintain those assets, and we have to be prepared to replace them when they come to the end of their useful life, and that's a big responsibility. And that amount is growing every year. This year, the city built $45 million worth of new assets, new roads, new pipes, those kind of things, new parks. And developers built another 27 on our behalf. So it grows every year, and it creates one of the challenges in our budgeting because those things are expensive to take care of and replace. On the liability side, the city ended the year with total debt of $27 million. Most of that was in the general fund, and you can see that about 2/3 of what's in the general fund is temporary financing. That is the short-term borrowing that we're repaying with casino funds, and that will be cleared off within 4 years. So that's good news. The long-term debt we have is actually very small. The sewer, drainage, and water fund borrowing of about $300,000 each will be paid off this particular year, in 2014, so next year. So we have a little bit of a savings there. And one of the things that I wanted to point out was $27 million sounds like a lot of money to most people, but you have to compare that to the $1.67 billion worth of assets. So to make that sort of more understandable for everybody, if you took the average home in Coquitlam has a value of about $580,000. The equivalent mortgage would be about $8,000. Our debt is about 1.5% of our asset value. So that would be like having an $8,000 mortgage on your $600,000 home. That's kind of a nice place to be. We're in very nice financial position. Okay. Also on our balance sheet, you'll see an accumulated surplus of $1.8 billion. It would be nice to say that that was just a big surplus and made up of cash. It is not. Most of that, 1.6 of it, is the equity we hold in the assets that we own because we own most of them outright. Okay. Then we have our reserves for operations that we talked about a little bit earlier, our reserves for capital, and our accumulated surplus. Now, when you look at that $136 million for capital, when you compare that to our $1.67 billion worth of assets, it's about 8% set aside for replacement. So it seems like $136 million is a very large number. Relative to the asset value that it's needed to replace, it's not that high. terms of our surplus for 2012. So this is the portion of that accumulated surplus that came from 2012. And you see in the general fund, we had a very small surplus, about $500,000. That is probably the smallest we've had in quite a long time. Well, since the year that we had all the snow and we were a little bit over. So our budgets are getting tighter and tighter as we go forward. In sewer and drainage, that sort of has the look that we overspent by $11.8 million. We did not. What we did was, some of our council will remember that a number of years ago, the drainage fund borrowed from the other funds in the organization in order to put in the big drainage pipe so that we didn't have to go to long-term borrowing through the MFA. Well, this year, there was enough of a surplus built up over a number of years that the drainage fund paid back all the other funds. Now, we are still owed that money from DCCs collected in the future, but it's all held within the drainage fund. So that's actually a good thing. We were able to clean that up this year. And our water fund had about $1.8 million surplus, and that was because of less usage of water conservation during the year. So in terms of our revenue and expenditure statement, revenues for the year totaled $281 million. About 70% of that, the two big pieces of the pie, come from our residents in the form of taxes or user fees. That percentage historically has been more like 80%. The reason it's down is because we have two bigger pieces of the pie. One is that developer contributions. That's the $27 million that developers built assets or paid for the assets that were built this year. And also our grants. That reflects the $7 million grant for the Evergreen Line station. Right? So it's always a good thing when you can grow your revenue pie without hitting your residents. That's kind of a nice thing. On the expenditure side, expenditures were $215 million. And those of you who are really quick at math will say, gee, we have a whole lot of money left over, about $65 to $70 million. Actually, that's the money that we spent on capital assets during the year. So we didn't actually have a lot of money left over. We had about $500,000. So what does all this mean? Well, it means that 2012 was a very good year. We made a whole lot of progress on our strategic goals, some of them very significant, creating new funding mechanisms, getting a new SkyTrain station, opening a new library. Some of them were really, really significant. And we ended up in a better financial position than we started. Our assets were up, our debts were down, and we had more cash in the bank. So that's actually a really good thing. When you look at 2013, normally I say that, gee, 2013 looks to be the same. Actually, not so much this year. Development revenue's down a little bit. You'll see when you get your first trimester review that things are going a little bit slower, and we have some additional expenditures. But the good news is that we're in a better position and better able to address those kinds of concerns. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you very much. I just want a quick clarification. You said that the 1.67 billion intangible capital assets was the historic value.
Yes.
The depreciated value.
The replacement, that's the historic value, what we paid for them. The replacement value would be considerably more. When we go to replace those assets, it's some number of years in the future.
Is there a tallying of that difference of the current value of the ultimate replacement value at some point?
We do not have that for all our assets yet. We do have that for our vehicles. We're trying to get to building the inflation in, but we don't have that for every asset.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Thank you. Great.
That was sort of along the line I was going to go with this. I think it's some really good news here. It's always good to hear good news at a time that our residents are lining up to pay their taxes. So it's good to hear that the majority believe that they're getting good value for their tax money. I'm very curious. And this is an exercise that I go at home and go through at home and sort of look at what's the value of my house today, and what is my debt applied to that house, whether it's in the form of a mortgage or in the form of a credit line. And when I look at this, and I thought it was very interesting that you said that currently our debt is $27 million, and that if we divide that by the value of the homes, that the average homeowner with a $580,000 home basically has an $8,000 debt, which would be applied, because people can't pick up their home and property and move to another city. It's almost like a strata. In many respects, being a homeowner in Coquitlam is a strata. You share in the wealth of the city, and you share in the debt of the city. And so if a homeowner with a home worth $580,000 would have the equivalent debt of $8,000 that over time, if we didn't have other sources of revenue, would be applied to his home, because as the homeowner, they're responsible. Sort of, but
You know what, no, you're kind of mixing
But
things. It's
capital,
the
but-
proportion related to our capital. The actual debt per capita, which you can see in your annual report,
Okay.
on
Right.
page 23, is $225 a person.
right,
About 800.
Yeah. About
Okay.
800 for a home,
per home.
per home.
Okay, so just walk me through the 8,000.
Well, what I'm taking is, I took, if you take our $27 million worth of debt
Right.
and divide it by our asset value, it's
Right.
1.5%. So I took 1.5% of the average home value. That's the proportion relative to the assets owned. It's not, you're mixing up sharing our debt amongst a number of people with the
Okay.
proportion to our assets.
Okay.
The average debt per person in Coquitlam is shown on page 83.
Right.
It's $225 a person, so about 800 or so per family.
So if we were to pay off the debt and say this year we want to pay off the debt, that's what they would have to pay. I'm just
Yes,
curious
yes.
that because over time, actually where I was going with this is over time we have built up a wealth. It may not be 1.6 billion because that's not depreciated. But have you done the similar? Is there a calculation that shows that when you come to Coquitlam, not only do you buy a home, but you have a share of the city, sort of almost like in a strata, you have a share of, if you're in a strata development, there's pools, there's amenities that you have a share of. When you come to Coquitlam, you have a share of the parks and all of these amenities. Has that calculation ever been done? You've sort of calculated the debt, but have we ever calculated what
No,
the
we
what
haven't,
the
but-
wealth is? I think it would just be very
Very
curious
interesting.
to know that, because we always hear our residents compare, well, if I were in Port Coquitlam or if I were in North Vancouver, my taxes would be different. But over time, those communities have either built up or don't have as many of our assets. And I just think that someday it'd be very curious to know that how that
The rough
relates
value
to.
is about $42,000. So if you take our total asset value of $1.67 billion and you divide it by approximately 40,000 homes, that's very rough, then it's about $42,000.
So over time, the
That's
city
not
has brought it.
equitable, because it's a.
Not really, because they have to
Yeah.
pay a fee often to use
Right.
these facilities, but yeah, they do have
But I-
assets at lower than market value.
But
for
I'm just
sure.
thinking it's interesting to note that over time, through taxes and grants and savings by previous councils, that we have built up an equity that all of our taxpayers enjoy. And the only time we really look at it is when we pull this sheet out, this book out. But in fact, this city is well off in terms of what we've done. And our balance sheet, we're well off, as you said, that our debt is only 200 and whatever per
$225 per person.
$225 per person. So I think that's all good news, and I was just really happy to sort of see it put into the same perspective that I, as a homeowner, would put my own debt and assets into.
That's
Thank you.
helpful. Maybe we'll publish that in the future.
Yeah.
And on the debt of $225 per person, the majority of that's going to be paid back not by those persons, but by somebody else.
Almost all of it, because remember, 2/3 of the general fund debt is going to be paid back by casino money because it's our short-term borrowing. So
Or
only a third of it.
And in fact, we have 31 million more in the bank. So although this debt is, it's like your mortgage. You can, you stretch it over 25
Yes.
years, but you can either put payments against it, or you can say, you can use manufacturing. So in actual fact, we had enough extra coming into the bank that it really covers the debt. But for borrowing charges and other things, it makes sense to continue to keep the outstanding loans. But we actually had a pretty good year.
We had a great year.
Okay, thank you.
We had a great year.
A great year.
A great year.
Councilor Segura.
Yeah, thank you. On page 11.
Page 11.
this
The really detailed one?
Sherlock
Yeah,
County.
this is the
Okay.
one. Okay.
Page
Uh,
11.
I just want to see, it says surplus for the year. In 2012, you have a $22 million surplus. Is that surplus in our budget? Right,
Page 11?
page 11.
Page 11. Oh, sorry, page 11.
Surplus for the year. Sorry.
Surplus for the year. Yeah, but that's, remember the surplus though is in this financial reporting is a lot more than a cash surplus, right? It's the money between your revenues and expenses that goes toward capital.
Okay, what would the surplus be without all those fancy things for the year?
Yeah, that would be, it will go back to right here. So there's the surplus for the year. In the general fund, it was $500,000. So we were really, really close to budget. In the sewer and drainage fund, we paid back $12.5 million worth of debt, so it would be 1.5 is 0.7.
So
$700,000.
So if you took that 11 plus that point
But
Oh.
no, because you have to take off the debt. We paid back $12.5 million of debt from drainage for the big pipe to the other funds. So the actual surplus achieved in the year would be $700,000.
Okay,
And in the water fund, it was $1.8 million because of water conservation.
okay.
So,
You make your life very easy today.
all right, I was like that. Okay, John?
Okay.
2.5 million.
On page 36,
36.
salaries and benefits. I wonder in 2000, I know 2012, you had $1.6 million for consultants,
Okay?
right?
Yep.
How about 2013? What's in our budget for this year for consultants? Because they're all over the place.
Yes, you know what, I can't remember that off the top of my head, but it was considerably less. It was, I believe I mailed that to you. I don't have it at my fingertips, but I believe it was about $900,000. It was considerably less because there are a number of things that were charged to consulting in 2012 that were replacements of things that are budgeted as salaries, those kinds of things.
That
And,
bill.
And there were
noticed-
some extraordinary
And
things.
I noticed that in one of these statements, financial statements, that you have, under consultants, you have the QNAP salaries. That's under consultants. Why?
Because we hire a consultant to do some of that work. Well,
So in other words, the manager of QNAP, his salary comes out of consultant fees rather than?
no, not the manager, that's Rick Adams.
Yeah.
But no, Rawl, who's the technical expert that does, I don't know, the more technical
He
things.
does
Can you help me with that?
Yeah.
What he does.
Roll works for Rick, and he does the field work. He's a consultant.
He's not an employee.
He's not an employee.
And those are things I really have difficulty with. This QNAP is supposed to be away from the city. It's supposed to be independent body, but it's not. Because every statement shows QNAP is part of the city.
Well, we are required to consolidate QNet statements in our consolidated statements by legislation, because it's a wholly owned subsidiary. of-
Law.
Yeah,
I
we have to
realize
record
that.
it.
Well, then it's not an independent body then.
Well, it's
part of the
independent,
city.
but it's required by law to be reported
Yeah.
in a consolidated
So
way.
because it's embodied in the city, but if the board of directors were not embodied in the city, weren't part of the city, you wouldn't have to do all that, would you?
Yes, we would, even if it had a separate board of directors that had nothing to do with the city, because it's wholly owned by the municipality, it would have to be
So-
reported.
So if I have a company here, okay, my board of directors are not management of the city.
Mm-hmm.
The money's not come from the city. I wouldn't have to report it to the
Right,
city, would I?
because it wouldn't be wholly owned by the city if the money didn't come from the
That's
city. But if the money came from the city, which it did in the case of QNet, it is wholly owned by the city. The city is the sole shareholder of the corporation, then it does have to be consolidated.
And then, when we're talking about, the surveys that we get, the surveys that we get, I think you need to rethink that, because the surveyor was wrong in 2 last elections in Alberta and British Columbia. So I don't know how you can believe the surveyor anymore. And the fact is that, matter of fact, 3 years ago, when I mentioned, when the survey said that the people were very, and I think, Mayor, you remember that, we had a terrible, terrible service on garbage. You were getting all kinds of calls. I was getting a lot of calls.
Yep.
It was maybe 4 years ago, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And it was a terrible service. We had about 50 calls a day of how bad the garbage service was. And yet, in your report, survey said 96% of the people are very, very happy with the garbage. Well,
Well, actually, it was a much lower number than that, but it was higher than 50. That's partly a reflection that half the people in the city don't get city garbage collection. They get collected.
I think what happened, that they surveyed people in apartments.
Well,
Yeah.
we know they did. They surveyed all of the residents of Coquitlam.
It's a random sample of
Anyway,
residents, so.
those are the things that I just want to
They
talk to
phoned you
you
once.
to make, so now you can relax, because I
you didn't
don't have
work
any
for the
more
city.
questions.
Thank you very much.
It's not. Terry.
Oh, thank you. I came quickly. Heard your presentation to the people who are to do the math between page 77 and 79 would notice that while we had revenue of $281 million, we had listed expenses of $215 million as well. And that actually did catch my attention, and I knew there'd be an explanation for it, and I thought it would probably be capital. But I remember that before I started spending a lot of time and hanging around this place, that I did try to pore over some of these documents on my own, and I found that a little confusing. Those sorts of things, maybe not specifically that. Now, so for the general public, is there any way of making it clear in this, when they dig down into this page, where there's one balance sheet right there on one or two pages where it's all very clear. Maybe there is something in there and I missed it.
Well,
But,
you know what? Our statements are a little bit tough. They conform to the appropriate standards for government organizations. And to be perfectly honest, you really need to know what you're looking at. That's why we do all the graphs and the pictures to try and help people. And for those who are really interested, we encourage them, call us up. We'll walk you through it. We'll help you. Because it's not really that easy. For most people, the pictures and the graphs help.
Yeah, I remember before I was on council, this really didn't help because I wanted some hard numbers. And then to go and look for the hard numbers never seemed to balance for me. Never seemed to have.
Yeah.
So I had to.
Yeah,
I would like to see, even if it's something from the communications department, interpreting this, to have one sheet that actually has some of the hard numbers there, that says this is how we essentially balance the budget this year. So some of those bigger figures are there. So it doesn't have to be certifiably accountant friendly, but perhaps certifiably people friendly.
We could look at
so
that.
People could understand a little better.
We could look at putting something like that together, and you know what we'll do? We'll maybe run it by you, see if you like it.
Well,
see if that
run
fits
it
the
by
bill.
the working professionals, not the semi-retired ones. So, thank you. Now, you also made mention in about the reserves that we're building up, all these different areas, so can you explain to us and to the public that's watching, and maybe open the door to those guys outside as well, because actually I was
Just
thinking
about half
those
an hour
doors
ago.
should be open so they could hear this. The rationale for why today's taxpayers seem to be paying for all the new facilities now as we go. There wasn't a lot of reserves built up in past years, were there? There's like for the big sports things, for the fire hall and everything, that is being paid for now out of casino money and other places. And we're also, today's taxpayers also being asked to save for the future, when that wasn't the practice in the past. But now, it's almost, and I get this from some people I talk with, it's almost like we're facing, current taxpayers facing the double whammy of not being able to enjoy the benefits of casino revenues now, because we're paying for that now, but we're also supposed to be saving for the future, but that wasn't happening before. Why is today's taxpayer facing this double whammy? And so give me some good rationale so I can talk to the people out there that I talk with.
That's a good
I
question.
could do that one.
The first part of the answer to that is that I don't actually think today's taxpayers are paying a double whammy. I don't think that they have been hard done by. The vast majority of the amenities in the community have been paid for over time in the long history out of land sales. We used to use our land sale reserve money to pay to build facilities. What happens is your land is an appreciating asset, but when you trade it for a building, it's a depreciating asset. And over time, it's going to cost you money to maintain it, and at the end of its life, you're going to have to pay to replace it. So what happens is if you take your land and you sell it off, you don't have it to sell anymore, and the value of what you traded it for is going down. And so over time, you shortchange the future if you sell an appreciating asset and trade it for a depreciating asset, especially if you don't fully fund the depreciation as you go along to replace it at the end. And Coquitlam, like most municipalities, we are no different than anyone else. In fact, I think we're doing a bit better going into the future. We have to move to a new future. You can't trade off appreciating assets for depreciating assets forever. So
you're essentially, so what I could perhaps answer when people talk to me about this is that, well, actually we are benefiting over the past from the land sales, and we're essentially, since we can't create new land to benefit the future taxpayers, as we've benefited from the past taxpayers who acquired the land, we are creating reserve funds instead to sort of take the place of the land that's not there anymore? Is that?
The short answer is, in every generation, presumably the taxpayers or the people who benefit from these facilities should pay for them once. The taxpayers in Coquitlam haven't paid for those facilities yet. Along came, 40-year-old Poirier, and it needed to be replaced. We hadn't saved up the depreciation or the money to replace it. Fortunately for us, the casino came along and bailed us out one more time and mostly paid for those new facilities. Now we would be smart. We're not going to have the same volume of land sales in the future. I mean, the land's going to go up, but eventually you run out of land to sell. And we may or may not have a casino to pay for these bills in the future. So we need to be building reserves toward replacement and get it right this second generation out. That's what we're doing.
Okay. Final point I had was you talked about the size of the tax increase has decreased for 5 years now?
5 years now. It's gone down.
Okay.
It's gone down each year.
Okay. And is there any, so people, that's good news. The door should be open there
Yes.
as well. And a lot of us around the table have worked hard at making that happen. Are you able to give any indication yet about, you did say something about the building permits, value of building permits not as good this year?
It's a bit slower in the first half of the year. Apparently there are a lot of applications out there, and it may recover by the end of the year, but at this point we don't know. If you compare, for example, our DCC collections, which is an indication of how many projects, we're about half of what we were in the first half of last year, so it's a little bit slower.
So as my colleagues and I start looking forward to next fall when we're going to start doing this budget process again, are there any other trends that we should be aware of as we all work towards decreasing the increase or getting it down to nothing? Are there decreasing the increase? That's a wonderful governmental kind of thing. But that's a slogan. Let's keep the decrease on the decrease of the increase.
If that's our goal, it's going to be the same challenge every year. Every year there are numerous requests. Everybody wants a little bit more service out of government, and you know what? It gets a little bit harder to get the revenue, and you will have the same challenges going into the 2014 budget that you had in 2013. In fact, the numbers are reasonably similar.
So when development permit values declines, though, that has an impact on revenue that the city is getting, and that will have an impact on our budget considerations. So are there any other trends out there that we should be aware of, positive, negative, and different?
Well, inflation's reasonably low. We're not anticipating large inflation. We're not going to get a lot more investment income because interest rates are relatively stable and they're not being predicted to go up very much higher. We might have a challenge with the development revenue if that continues through the remainder of this year. The other place that we have a little bit of a challenge is when your development revenue is low, also your DCC collections are low. That doesn't have the same impact on your current year budget, but what that does is it gives you less money to advance your growth-related infrastructure projects in the future. So that might impact our 2014 capital program. We might have to slow things down a little bit. But in theory, if the growth is less, you don't need those new amenities quite as quickly.
We borrowed against our projected DCC revenue for Burke Mountain, and we budgeted a payback timeline, and that might be affected.
No, we will have to make the debt payments regardless of what happens with our DCCs, but the first amount of our DCCs will be dedicated toward debt payment before we can add new projects into the. But remember, the amount of repayment for that borrowing is quite small. It's about $1.5 million a year, and in a good year, we will collect $16 to $17 million in DCCs. So the debt payment component is pretty small. We've already collected enough money to make the debt payments related to our new borrowing. So we'll be okay there.
And thank you. One really general question, and I really do appreciate the great work that's gone into this. And my first reaction actually last week when I got these documents, but looking at the details of the documents, is, wow, really well presented and well produced. And I must congratulate your department and the communications department for doing this. It's really
and
good.
Corporate planning as well.
And corporate planning as well. All right, good. Thank you. One broad question in terms of this report today, and you're the manager of financial services, right?
Yeah.
So you are at the same time reporting on some things that aren't strictly financial services.
Absolutely.
So how does that happen? And
I get lots of help. I get to be the lucky person that gets to sit here and boast a little bit about all the great things that are done. But if you look at those accomplishments, they certainly aren't accomplishments of the Financial Services Department. They're accomplishments of the organization as a whole. It's really a tradition that the annual report is a financial document because that is the largest component. It's these big fat statements. But let's face it, what people like to look at is the nice pretty charts.
so, and if they picked any of the managers to make this presentation, on this tradition, you could have been somebody else.
Sure.
They couldn't have picked anybody better. So
Oh, thank you so much. That's nice.
Okay, and on that point, I'd like to look to one of the managers who was less able to do it, Jim.
Thanks, Your Worship, and good afternoon, Council. Maybe if I just help Sheen out a little bit and expand on some of the questions around the building and development side, because, yeah, the numbers are off, and we want to be forthright with Council that 2012 was a banner year, which built on a banner year before that. 2013, the numbers down a little bit. But you need to recognize a couple things. And again, in Coquitlam, we're very fortunate. It's like we have three markets, or three market niches, if you will. There's Greenfield up in the northeast, City Center, and then southwest Coquitlam. What we've seen, my observation would be, so far this year, we haven't seen any of the big projects come online to the point where we're actually issuing the building permits and collecting money. Each of those towers that goes in, 120, 130 units, that's a big whack. That's like 2 or 3 subdivisions up in the northeast. So you have to keep it in sort of in proportion to what else is happening around. So, and we do monitor. As Sheena said, there's been a lot of conversations at the executive team with some of the other managers as we track through with the, and that's the whole, one of the whole underlying purposes of the trimester reporting is to track these things. Are we going this way or going that way? Do we need to make adjustments? And so that's, I just want to assure Council that we are doing that. The last thing I would, and we've gone back, and I've gone back and I've asked both my planning managers and the building managers to look at what we built into our assumptions and projections for the budget, both in terms of revenue, but also the DCCs. Go back and let's just revisit those projects. Where are they at? Stage in the process. How confident are we they're going to come forward? And so we'll be tracking that, and the numbers may not be as high as projected for 2013, but I think they're going to be higher than what we were first led to believe in this first trimester.
Okay, and May had a comment.
So I'm going to sort of continue where Jim left off, and of course a big part of our business is the business that I'm in, and we always have cycles, we always have waves, we're always going up and down. Sometimes it lasts 6 years, sometimes 7, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. But as well, and Jim and I have had this conversation many times, this is the time there's also opportunities present themselves, and good opportunities for us, and we're allowed to take advantage of some of them because we are in good financial shape, and because borrowing is very low right now. And let's say in our city we have greenfield to develop, so infrastructure has to go in. So we can have someone, and we've partnered before on infrastructure, we can have it go in, and we can have it go in now. And even though we may borrow, or we may not borrow, or they may finance it, or we may finance it, whatever, it all comes in on latecomer agreement. So in the end, it's all covered. But the beauty of that is if we're not doing that much of a brisk business, nobody else is either. So what we do is try and take advantage of the people that are in the infrastructure business so that we can get folks out there, we can get them at a better rate, we'll get better tender prices, and when we get in the ground and we're ready, when the market starts to curve back up, we're sitting there with lands that are ready to go and ready to sell, and that really bodes well for us. We have taken advantage in the past. In a couple of slow years, I was trying to rack my brains for a few things we did, Jim, but that really works. I wanted to talk about the no reserves. No, we had no reserves. It wasn't the thing that members of council in those days. A few of us tried to do reserves, but it brings taxes up, and that was just, we didn't do that. But I'll tell you the one thing we did do. We land banked. We invested in land, and so we see some of that come to fruition now. So although there weren't reserves built up, there is land built up, so we sort of saved that way in the piggy bank. And the last thing and I hope we do take advantage of some of these opportunities, because I can think of quite a few out there that would work for us if the market's going to be like jelly, and it's what a term in my business that we use. It's like jelly. The market gets somewhere, and then it just sort of hangs about and shakes for a while, and that's about where we are now. It was interesting in the analogy you made on our debt versus, our assets, and then you said, like for the lay person, because you're always doing these wonderful things, like the house was probably the best thing we ever did. When people look at the house and they saw exactly how much of their taxes were paying for what it gave, oh, okay, I can relate to that. They can't relate to these big numbers, but they can relate to the house. But I was fascinated when Craig went back, because you were doing it as an analogy, but he took it in a totally different way. So here we go again on a few of the ones we put out. I want to be really careful how if we're going to do some of these things, how we put them out, because to make sure they can't be taken in ways that there's going to create great confusion. Because if somebody who owns a $3 million home somewhere figures, they own as much of Coquitlam as I own in my little townhouse, it just isn't going to work. So I don't want to be putting things out there that are going to just not help us again, because we did that once too, but I can't remember what it was. But did you have your house out again this year? I didn't see it.
Put it out at budget time, and it goes in our budget flyer.
Yeah, okay, because
So when people get their tax bill, they see the
that's
little
one
house.
of the best analogies we've ever
helpful.
put out. So anyhow, thank you for a job well done, and I'm getting used to the orange. Next year it will be bright green or bright purple, or I can hardly wait. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was looking for the inspiration for the orange, and so I found in the annual report the staple-bound one on page 2. It's actually the 4th page, but it's the numbered 2. One of us is wearing orange.
No, it's red.
Okay. It's reddish. Okay.
And this is not orange either.
I noticed that.
I'm actually glad.
I had a number of comments, and I actually really appreciated the one that suggested that how do we make it even more friendly. I think it's a really great document. But as we try to engage the public in the issues associated with our budget and associated with our finances, and I looked at that number at 215, which was the expenses, and I pictured a little bubble that said, this is the expenses, but it's not all of the expenses because it doesn't include capital or something like that. So it's obviously not part of the financial statement, but most citizens don't read financial statements. One of us reads them as his form of evening entertainment. But
And I'm not asking any questions.
yeah, he's not asking any questions, which suggests that you've done a really good job. But those,
to defend, though.
but those citizens who don't, I think I'd love to see us go even that one step further to a really general explanation that allows the public to, okay, 215, that's different from 270. What is the difference? And the difference is capital. And now I'm going to go to the
The
second.
simplest solution to that actually would be to add an extra piece of the pie and just put capital expenditures. We could do that, and make
Yeah,
a match.
there you go.
Of course, that wouldn't really be appropriate for our financial statements, but you could put that in.
Yeah. Okay. And then I went right through the last page, 86, second last page, includes the principal corporate taxes, and I wondered why we don't have what it actually is, and I wonder if there's a reason why we can't. Pension Fund Realty, for example, the shopping center, our largest taxpayer, I think everyone would recognize it as soon as you say it's Coquitlam Center Mall, but it doesn't say so.
Because that's the owner of the property.
And I recognize that. And with the tax exemptions, similarly, I don't necessarily need the address, but I think the public might be interested in knowing what the permissive tax exemptions relate to, whether it is a homeless shelter or or some other element.
Okay.
It might give the public a better impression of, or better understanding, more than anything else, of some of the other things.
We could do that.
I had another number of other notes, but I'll just hand it to you when I do it. I thought it was an absolutely wonderful document.
That would be great, and we're anxious to hear your feedback. If there's things we could do that would make it easier for the people you're talking to, we'd be happy to incorporate that.
At this point, we're making an excellent document, arguably. I'm not sure we'd be improving it or making it worse.
Well, with a little luck, we'll get the prize
You better
again this
leave it
year.
alone.
Exactly. Yeah. So assets up, debts down, more cash in the bank, and 5 years.
In
of
my world,
lowering
it doesn't get better than that.
Well, let's move on to the next item.
Oh, this is
Good news.
A motion to receive would be in order.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? With our great thanks. Very good.
Mr. Chair, there's a requirement for you to invite questions from the public who.
Oh, I knew that. I was just, we were just receiving it
Yes,
first.
I knew that too, that's why I did not interrupt.
Okay. Are there any questions from the public? Any questions from the public? Any questions from the public? Did we receive any written questions? None? Therefore, we're done. Do we have to re-receive it, or we're good?
Nope, all is
Okay.
good.
Good.
The public representatives asked the questions.
That's right. There's
Exactly.
just
Democracy has worked.
there's a legislative requirement, you may have seen the ads in the paper that remind that this opportunity exists, and it's kind of strategic measures. Item 2 is the minutes of the council committee meeting held Monday, June 17th. Recommendation to approve.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is a delegation. I'd like to invite Mr. Tom Cox from the Westwood Plateau Community Association to come forward, and he's here to speak about signage for all candidates' meetings.
Did you get 2 files I sent you?
I did.
Oh, thank you.
Cozy.
Good day, sir. How are you doing?
Fine.
We actually made the decision to do this kind of meeting in this room because it would be more comfortable and a little bit more personal.
Okay. Anyway, I'm Tom Cox from Westwood Plateau, 1465 Parkway Boulevard. Anyway, as you are aware, the Westwood Plateau Community Association held an all-candidates meeting on May the 11th for the provincial election. As has been our practice over the years, 2 weeks prior to the event, we put up signs around the plateau advertising this event to try to get people interested and out to listen to the candidates so they could decide who they wanted to represent them and perform their democratic right to vote. A few days before the meeting, we were served with a bylaw violation for having signs on city property, advised we could be fined, and told to take them down by 6 a.m. the following morning. We complied with this order as we did have signs on city property. Our meeting attracted over 130 people, which by all standards represents a large turnout for this kind of an event. As we understand, the Chamber of Commerce event only drew 30 people. We do not feel we could attract this many people without the broad advertising coverage throughout the neighborhood. The current rules only allow advertising in limited areas, none of which are on the plateau. Our request today is to ask you not to change the location for signs by candidates, but to amend the current sign bylaw to permit advertising for all candidates' meetings up to 2 weeks prior to a federal, provincial, or civic election, and that signs must be of a professional nature, and signs may be put up through a neighborhood as long as they do not obstruct a city sign. Currently, every week, there are garage sale signs, moving sale signs, and other signs put up on city property, with most of them handmade signs. We understand these people want to get rid of items and do not object, except when they are left up long after the date advertised, and in some of these situations, we remove them just to get rid of the clutter ourselves. While we advertise on our reader board at Johnson and David, we feel without the benefit of the neighborhood signs, we could not attract enough people to make the event worth the time of the candidates, and will likely have to give up this important event. We understand there's some work involved in making the requested change, and there is reluctance to make bylaw changes, but we feel strongly there is a need to allow people to hear firsthand from candidates so they can be better informed and encouraged to exercise their right to vote. Some other local community associations agree with this as well. We hope you will agree and consider the proposed change so we may prepare for the next expected election, the civic election in November next year, and have a forum that may include many of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I want to, if I can, speak a little bit on behalf of council. We give staff a tough job. We set a bylaw that tries to cover every eventuality and doesn't. It automatically, as soon as you write a bylaw, it doesn't cover a bunch of unforeseen circumstances. And then staff go out and try to figure out how to respond to a particular situation. I agree entirely. We want to engage the voters. We want them to know about all candidates' meetings so they can be more informed when they vote. We don't want the auction signs and the clothing sales signs and the automotive signs and all the other signs that show up on our streets. And so staff are out there doing what they think is the best job they can. And I'm going to actually ask if staff had any comments related to this particular situation in a moment. But West Plateau Association does a great job engaging and just doing the work that you do. The Reader Board is an excellent example. You're our most involved neighborhood association, and our bylaw, I don't know whether it reflected as well as it could have, how we have to respond to that kind of thing. And maybe we do need to find a solution specific to all candidates' meetings signs. So I'm going to ask staff if they had anything, and then we're going to go around to, I've got Lou, Craig, Terry. We'll start.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Why don't you could step forward?
Certainly.
In charge of bylaw enforcement, so we sent her all the complaints. And
good afternoon, Your Worship and Mayor and Council. This is a particular situation where, indeed, the placement of the signs in question was in contravention of the city's postering bylaw. And as Your Worship mentioned, we attempt in all these cases to try to manage situations appropriately. In this case, we didn't take them down immediately. We allowed for additional time and then issued a notice of violation, which warned that there could be additional enforcement action coming.
that's not a fine. That's not a ticket.
There were no tickets issued, no fines issued. There was a notice of violation, which warns if additional non-compliances are found to happen that fines may be issued, but no fines were issued in this case. As for the nature of the postering bylaw, it does, on the face of the bylaw, prohibit these sorts of signs on city property, but it is certainly up to council if they would elect to make an exception, or we can bring back some amendments that would allow that if that's council's direction.
Sounds good. I thank you very much for that input. I've got Lou, Craig, Terry.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I think that there's a situation that, I think we need to address it and somehow allow these kind of things to happen. And I think not only for the Westwood Plateau Association, there's other associations in our, Northeast Coquitlam ratepayers, there's the Coquitlam ratepayers, you name it. And I think that, something like this, 2 weeks before all candidates meeting or whatever it is, that this be allowed. I see no problem with it, providing that it goes up professionally and also be taken down at an appropriate time. So I have no difficulty with that whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. Craig.
This one is a bit of a tough one because I fully appreciate the work that your group does, and we often talk around this table about how we want to engage citizens, and we're always concerned about low voter turnout, particularly in the civic elections, and ways to get people engaged. And we've had this discussion just last year with the sports groups, who were concerned about, and again, we wanted those sports groups to reach out to the community and get kids active in sports through registration. And so we went through this with the sports group saying, well, you can't have signs all over the city because one of the challenges we have when the signs go up, pretty soon the auction signs go up and then the whole next and you get these clusters of signs. And with the sports groups, they worked through the sports council to select 6 locations, and we set some parameters on it. They just picked these were the spots that they were going to go, and we put some controls on it, but at the same time recognized that we also that they were providing a service, and that seems to be working well for them. But I appreciate also the fact that those locations don't necessarily, I don't think there's one of them in the Plateau. I think the closest one is down here. So that presents the challenges within a small neighborhood. How do you publicize an event that's of the common good to the community? So I'm wondering if there is a way to look at this and certainly put some parameters on it, and not so much to control your group, but also to recognize that we don't get all the garage signs and everything joining in. And this was the problem with the sports groups, was they put up a sign. They were very diligent in making sure that it didn't stay up too long. They now have to put dates on the backs, and there's a whole lot of things that they have to do, and it seems to be working well. I see them in these clusters, and the complaints we were getting, I think, have come down, and we're not seeing them, being, wired up to the wire fences all over town like we were before. So that seems to be, I think, working well, but I still recognize that that may not be the best solution for when we have these one-off events. And so I would be interested to see what staff has, solutions. It may be, again, that we pick specific spots. I mean, again, we can't have them on, stop signs, and there may be some things that we can't do, but maybe there are some options of how we can sort of make some allowances for this without opening up the floodgates to everybody else. And that's my big concern, is it's the people that are going to jump on, and I know you've said yourself, you end up having to go down and take down the signs. And I believe that our bylaws staff do a good job. I mean, we're not everywhere. We can't get out there every Sunday morning to pick them up afterwards. But we do try, and maybe you can sort of explain a little bit, because we do try to control that. But one of the problems is that authorized signs sometimes lead to everybody jumping in as well. Maybe you can sort of comment on what we're trying to do.
We do, each bylaw enforcement officer that is assigned to their, as you know, the city is divided into zones, and sign removal is part of each officer's enforcement role. So they do take time to go around and remove signs. Obviously, they have a lot of competing obligations, but that is certainly part of their role. And we have additionally devoted additional hours to sign removal in the last 6 to 8 months, which has been working well. It's difficult to keep up, and there are the problems of unauthorized garage sales, et cetera, that end up on the stop signs, but we do our best to remove them when we see them.
But it might be possible, as I said, I think the staff could go back, look at how we can deal with this, and I think work with the Residents Association. It sounds like they want to do professionally made signs, pick certain locations, and hopefully that won't lead to the sort of everybody who else jumps in, which would be my concern. Is how we deal with what I see as the signs that we do need and advertise that we do need, but at the same time not opening up the floodgates, and how we can work with the residents associations to facilitate that, because I know you don't want to see all the extra stuff the rest of the time either. So how do we deal with this without opening up that gate? So I'd be very curious to see if we could do something. Thank you, Barry.
Yes, I'd agree that we should try to look at something, and I want to thank Tom for being so engaged in this whole association. He was in touch with me when this was unfolding, and he wanted to obey the law. When he was asked to take the signs down, they took them down. There wasn't grumbling or complaining as much as this law isn't really a great law, because I certainly agreed that in terms of civic engagement, voter engagement, that's a very valuable thing. So I'd support going forward and seeing if we can find a way of accommodating legitimate requests from legitimate community organizations for things like an all-candidates meeting. One question I have, what was the size of the signs that were taken? Were they just lawn signs, or were there bigger plywood signs that you had going, or were they all quite modest?
They were about 16 inches by 16 inches, I guess.
So that's quite small, yeah. So we're not talking big billboards or anything, and I certainly wouldn't want to see a bunch of big billboards springing up, even for an all-candidates meeting. So when we're talking about modest lawn sign type things, I would like to see something.
Yeah, these weren't lawn signs; these were signs for the other. I mean, we could change to long.
Yeah, about that size. I mean, long 16 inches.
In fact, actually, they're the kind that we can change the date very easy, and that way we don't have to keep buying new ones.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you for that. And yeah, I would support going forward with some change. Thank you.
Thank you. Instead of going to all the work to change the bylaws and reinventing the wheel, because we have the 3 different types of elections, why do we not, as a city, have a blank sign that on the bottom says, because of the elections or whatever, authorized by the city of Coquitlam, and then anyone can pick them up and use them, and they won't get taken down?
That's certainly an option we can consider as well.
It's going to save us a lot of time of, this, because we're only doing this for elections, whatever election they may be, and then the community associations can pick them up, and it says authorized by us on it, and they know they're allowed up for 2 weeks or something. It would make a lot more sense.
The good thing is we don't have any elections coming up quickly, so I'm going to, I can't make motions, but I'm going to suggest council pass a motion, or someone move a motion that says staff report back on how we might permit signage for all candidates' meetings related to election.
The most efficient way.
Direction, not a.
Direction.
Direction, yeah.
So it's, moved by
There you go,
Councillor,
done.
Okay, thank you.
O'Neill. Okay, and now that Councillor Reid has declared it as passed, I will have a vote. Councillor O'Neill and Councillor Hodge seconded it.
Why bother?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Democracy, that's why.
Okay, we're going to ask.
It's called city councilor engagement.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I was just saying that to Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Good job.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, Millardville, by the way, wanted me to make sure everybody knew that it was, everything, the signs had to be nonpartisan too, so. That was.
Oh, nobody's partisan in
No.
here.
Your worship, you wanted to provide
Yes.
additional remarks?
And I do want to actually, I wanted to invite you down to a council meeting so that we could do this, but you came down anyway on another subject because you did such a great job. Your association did an absolutely great job with this this thing that's coming up in its second year, I think.
It's there and disappeared.
It was there.
Okay, there it is. Okay. Where are you at here? Okay. That's what we had before.
Yes.
And it was nice, but it was rotting and crumbling. And actually, this section is still there. This was shot this morning. But I want to thank you very much for the leadership that you showed as an association in getting this done. If we can make that big. And it's an absolutely tremendous improvement. It's, to me, it really showed the leadership of your association in trying to improve the neighborhood, solve a challenge that you had inherited. And on behalf of council, thank you very much, and I want you to please pass on our thanks to your membership for what I think is a great job.
Oh, thank you very much.
Second that emotion.
Now, this was a wooden fence that was built during development. 15 years later, it was no longer had much serviceable life, and there are still large sections of the animal and bird streets that remain to be done, and we encourage that kind of leadership.
You know, we're putting out a newsletter on the Plateau to try to encourage the rest of the neighbors now to sort of take heed of this and hope that they'll follow suit. Wait and see.
It's a full concrete fence.
Oh,
Concrete, that's right.
Yeah, it looks really
And
nice.
it reduces noise and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
Good job.
thank you.
thank you again. Thank you for the reminder.
Thank you for your worship. Item 4 is our first report of staff. It pertains to the Glen Park Phase 1 completion. We have introductory comments by the Acting General Manager of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services, and the report is before you for information.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, members of council. Council may recall the project and budget were actually approved last year. The report, and I'm here before you today because there's been some time has passed by. In the intervening period, the work was passed on to our construction team to lead it to a near tender-ready state. That construction team is now with Strategic Initiatives. And just wanted to note a couple of points that are outlined in the report. We wanted to ensure that the concept or the design was brought forward to the Universal Accessibility Advisory Committee, and that was just done recently. I wanted to inform council of the final design, and in particular the fact that at the concept stage, water feature was referenced. That's not currently in the scope of works, but planned for a future phase to do something hopefully more significant for the community. Also wanted to advise council that while they're not in this phase, washrooms are still a consideration for the overall park, and that Strategic Initiatives are ready to bring this to tender and have the construction works done this year.
Outstanding. Anytime. I've got 3 speakers so far, but I want to begin by acknowledging how well it turned out so far. It's a really neat park, and we had some objections at the time, but I've heard nothing but praise for the work that's gone on so far, and anticipation of the remainder of the work.
So I think washrooms are something we really have to look at in that park, simply because of the folks that we are serving to have to run back to your house, wait for the elevator, go up 30 floors. That's just a little taxing on anybody. You know, that's a bladder problem, I would suggest. The wood fiber in the playground area, is it cedar? It's not cedar, is it?
Your Worship, it's not cedar.
No, because that's something a couple of the moms up around Blue Mountain Park had talked about it, or at Gomo Lake Park, and that's not good. The last thing, of course, is not that you don't want to spend the money, but the water feature. I hate opening, doing the park without doing something. I really have problems with this. What is the price differential between the aesthetic water feature that we were going to put in, and I believe that the spray park are around $400,000 or something. So how much was the water feature we were going to put in? Because wasn't that from a developer?
Your Worship, there were actually, I think, 3 or 4 different water feature designs developed in the course of time.
Yes.
They had a variety of budget estimates, the least of which would have been in the range of $60,000 or $70,000, compared to water or spray park, and the scope of that could expand anywhere from $250,000 to $400,000. So it's significantly more, and certainly not within the realm of the budget as it stands today.
So we have about $60,000. Is that what you're telling me for a water feature? And I need $400,000. Is that right?
The difference would be in that order of magnitude. That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay, so that's only $60,000 each developer. Thank you very much.
If I may, Your Worship, I believe it's
scares me.
In the report. We are anticipating more future development with the adjacent development, and that would be an ideal time to incorporate that.
Well, it would be, because it's going to be for every development here, and I think that it's one of those things that everyone can contribute to. Thank you very much.
Did get an email from a viewer at home. If you want to pull the microphone that's close to you, don't touch the foam. Leave it where it is now, because it'll take up everything. But when you speak, if you want to grab it by the plastic and move it closer to you, that might help. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted that we don't have a rollerblader park in there, because that was talked about some a year ago or 2 years ago. I'm glad that it's no longer there. Am I correct?
That's correct. There's no plans for that.
And I think before we go into second phase, I think very, very important we put washrooms in there. That should be long before anything else gets developed. There'll be kids there. There'll be adults there. They want to go to the washroom. Where are they going to go to the washroom? Behind a tree? That's exactly what's going to be happening. So I think washrooms are very important. I think, water features are nice, but what do we gain by them? Just look at them. There's nothing more than that. So I think a spray park in there where the kids can run around and get soaked up and everything else, I think it's a great way to go. It may be more money, but I'll tell you, if I have a chance to vote either on a spray park or water feature, I'll take a spray park anytime, because certainly the kids can enjoy it. The water feature, what is it? Just looking at it, taking pictures of it, period. Okay? Thank you.
Waste of a pond. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really pleased to see these plans go ahead. And I look at this little park here. I mean, it's not overly large compared to some of the other parks like Blue Mountain, or I see what you're saying, thank you, or even just a little to the north, the city center. But it's kind of a mini central park, given all the high rises that are going to be going around there. Just at the gate, the Windsor Gate right across, there's going to be 2 high rises at the corner. Just to the south, there's going to be the Big Audi project. And it's going to be a very popular and important park, I think. And I'm really pleased with this and the way it's going ahead. And yes, the washrooms eventually, and spray park perhaps eventually as well. but just generally speaking, the way that this park has shifted, being from one of basically two forested areas, both of which were kind of unsafe to go into, and then some playing fields, into this sort of multi-dimensional park that brings a lot of people in, that creates lots of opportunities for people to get together, to recreate, get outdoors, and even actually, studies have shown it creates economic value around it as well. These parks are good for communities as well. So I'm really pleased with this. I've got a couple specific questions and then one comment. I'm a little unclear at the entrance there. There seems to be, I'm not sure if it's a pergola or it's actually a canopy that's covered, the little staging area there right at the entrance with the, is there going to be a covered area there, or is that a pergola that water can come through?
Through the chair, it's not intended to be a covered area. So that's just kind of a architectural feature, a nice thing to draw your eye to, okay? Comment, certainly as more people come to this area, we're going to have to do more education about people taking advantage of the off-leash dog area there, because there are still a lot of people that run their dogs in the big open grassy area there, and they really shouldn't be doing that, especially when you've got one of the most magnificent off-leash dog areas that you're going to see anywhere. A very big one, very well preserved, well presented, and good fencing, lots of trees, everything like that. So people out there with dogs, use that, please. Don't run around on the major playing field. And just generally, another final comment. I'm really glad to see that so far there seems to be unanimous approval for this on council, whereas a year ago at this time, one of my council colleagues said that we were butchering the north end of the park, and now there's agreement. So I don't think that was a butchering of the park. I think that was a great creative way of opening up the park for all multiple uses, and more people to see, more people to use it. So thank you.
There you go. Councillor Hodge. Just looking at the plans here, and I think the park is developing nicely, and I'm just trying to remember, because I've been by and I've looked at the plans. At one point we had a board up there, and I've seen it somewhere. I think it was maybe in front of the park, but we've seen some other plans for this park. This here that is attached, this is just the Phase 1 plan, and I don't have Phase 2, or I guess the final here. But I'm just sort of wondering, how much more? How does this integrate into the next phases? We had at one point talked about having I think it was a skateboard park, and I think that's now off the board. We'd also talked to sport courts, water parks. So it would be helpful to sort of know how Phase 1 ties into the longer term vision, or what some of these other grassy areas. So maybe just sort of touch on that, please.
Certainly. Through the chair, this is Phase 1. My understanding, I don't think that other phases were outlined, just an ultimate build-out, and I think it would be appropriate when staff bring back an update that would include a washroom location, a spray park location, that itemizing phasing for council would be helpful. This, as was mentioned, the dog off-leash areas and a few other things were part of Phase 1. This would complete Phase 1. Future phases include improvements as to what's been described as a great lawn area, as opposed to what were for a period of time sports fields. Some improvement to pathways, some improved access are also part of the key features, and there's some more active elements, excluding roller or skateboard facilities, towards the west side, next to Westwood.
Yeah.
So there's some active uses in that area.
Might those include a sport court?
That's what's shown
on the overall concept plan. That's because I didn't see it here, and I didn't know if that's come off or if I'm just not looking at the total plan here.
And I apologize to council for not having included that overall plan with this. There aren't active plans for the Great Lawn area. The active areas are really towards Westwood and near Glen.
And I think that's perfect. This is a park that I don't think was fully utilized. It was more of a sort of a sports field sometimes, and I think this is becoming a park that the entire community can use. And I think certainly with the off-leash dog park, the potential to put in a little water park or something for the people in that neighborhood, and down the road a sport court. And to me, this is a park that's transitioning now back to community use as opposed to sort of organized use. And I certainly think we're on the right direction, and I look forward to seeing this. But I also think that part of community use is washrooms. I think that there are people are going to come to this park as a destination, and I think that would be helpful to have. Thank you.
Your Worship, if I could just address the issue on washrooms. Each element that we adds another dimension to the park, and I think really pushes the need for something like washroom facilities in the park. So certainly that needs to be considered.
Okay. Well, I'm going to echo the comments about dogs that are off-leash. We've now provided the facilities in the town center for off-leash. We've got, I think it's time, she left. We have to get bylaws out and actually eventually write some tickets and tell these people that you can no longer use all of our parks as off-leash dog areas, because we do provide facilities for that now. We need to have you respect the rest of the users of the parks. We have too many complaints of dogs harassing the wildfowl at Lafarge Lake, for example, because let's face it, there's a great big grass area over there that's just considered a dog off-leash area for 18 hours of the day, and that's got to end. In the same way that our Spirit Square, there's all kinds of parkland around here that gets used by dogs off-leash as though it's their right, and we're going to have to let them know, perhaps gently, but eventually very, very firmly, that this has to end. And May wants something, yes, on that.
Well, being the official doggy person, we've been gentle, thank you. It's time to just start getting bylaws to go in and ticket. There's no need for it. I mean, how many years do we go on telling folks that, you know, this isn't an off-leash area? And some people just don't get it. And until you start hitting them in the pocketbook, they won't. So we've just spent all this money on lovely off-leash areas down here. There's no reason people can't use them. There just isn't. And this is wrong. This is just really inequitable to everybody in the city. And so for those that think they're special, go to some other city and walk your dog if it has to be off-leash. In Coquitlam, abide by the rules or get a ticket.
I don't disagree. Nonetheless, I don't think it was so much that we've been gentle for so long. We've ignored it in large portions of large parks because we didn't really have the facilities, perhaps, or for whatever reason, the issue hasn't been enforced. I think the time has come to enforce it, but I prefer when you first start to enforce it after years of not enforcing it that strongly, you go out there and you say, that's it. The time has come. Here's your last warning. And then you absolutely issue the tickets in week 2 and make sure that people understand ahead of time that you're going to be issuing tickets now. John.
Thank you. Heather had to step out of the meeting, but I'll certainly take that message back to bylaw enforcement about
and Your Worship,
off-leash dogs.
our animal shelter's been open for 10 years, and for 10 years we've been harping on this, and 10 years is long enough. Long enough.
Headline, council calls for canine crackdown.
Canine crackdown, yeah.
More at 6.
Oh, boy.
And the leash loophole. Oh, my goodness. We're headline writers now.
Laxity.
Motion to receive?
So moved.
Nicholson, Hodge, all in favor, opposed, carried unanimously.
Thanks, Your Worship. The next item concerns the 2012 Annual Drinking Water Quality Report and its report for information.
Move the recommendation.
Second. Seconded, all in favor, opposed, carried unanimously. Wonderful drinking water. Way better than the stuff you can buy.
Item 6 is the 2012 Statement of Financial Information, and it's for
It's moved.
Second. All in favor, opposed, carried unanimously.
And item 7 is the report concerning the 2012 Annual Development Cost Charges. And this report is also for information.
moved.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimous.
Mr. Chair, that leaves us with two other business items. The first one concerns leaves and by-elections and was raised by Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. We have two councillors on leave who are halfway through their leave period. Part of the purpose of that leave period was to give us the opportunity to gather further information about what actions might be taken by the province, advice from other bodies, and anything that we could find that would help us make a better decision. And I'm curious as to what actions have been taken to try and gather additional understanding of positions at the provincial level and so forth. What we may have and who may have taken action to really try to ensure that we have all the information that we can have 2 weeks from today when we are presented with this issue once again.
I can provide information as to the questions being raised by other jurisdictions. We've heard from Pitt Meadows, which declined to give leave, and they're going forward in a different direction. Delta has agreed that the person can act when possible, sort of the same approach that Abbotsford took. And my understanding with regard to Mayor Fassbender's leave is that they're going to have an acting mayor appointed, and they're not going to go forward and have a by-election in that jurisdiction. I believe the same is somewhat true in Surrey, in that Councillor Hunt is going to act where possible and until January at least, and then to avoid a by-election there. What we were doing, and council members may recall that we had a chart that updated each of the jurisdictions. We're updating that chart as we go along, and that will form part of the follow-up report that will come back to council on July 8th. And so we're actively sort of keeping tabs of the various jurisdictions in the province that are facing the same questions that Coquitlam is. We have not specifically engaged the province. We've heard from them that they felt that this was an appropriate course of action, which is why it's being entertained by the other jurisdictions. There's not a possibility of them amending legislation in this time period, so it is not something that we have moved forward for in a specific manner. We would take additional guidance there if members of council felt that there was a specific question they would like to have answered.
It was not my intention to try and bring this debate on today rather than 2 weeks from now, but rather to make sure that whatever we could do was being done. Some of my colleagues, I think, had indicated some other possibilities at the province, the possibility the minister might, with the stroke of a pen, change the date in the legislation, stuff like that, and I don't know whether any of my colleagues have pursued any of those. If they are, I would hope that we'd all be fully informed before the 8th of July.
Absolutely. It would either form part of the report, but more likely if we had been asked to follow up in a specific manner, as all of council's aware, we have information to one, information to all policy, and that policy remains in effect at all times for all matters. So.
Thank you.
And I will let council know, as I promised to do, I did write to the Premier, copy to the Minister, specific to the question of short-term, long-term. The short-term, which is that section of the Local Government Act that permits the Minister to vary any date. And then that would be simply the request that the date be varied. Right now, the legislation says January 1st of the year of an election, after January 1st of the year of election, or beginning on January 1st of the year of an election, a council can opt to not have a by-election, can leave the position vacant. The minister could vary that date to be June 1st of the year preceding a general election, and that would be it. And any local government would then be allowed to accept resignations and leave the position vacant or have a by-election, depending on what their local needs were, and then we'd be able to make the decision based on that. Right now, it is a somewhat backward way of doing it, to accept the leave and then accept the resignation later, and that's essentially what the request was. Of course, I haven't heard from the Minister or the Premier. Okay. We will push for a response before the 8th.
I'm sorry, could we have a copy of the letter?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Sorry, that was my oversight, I suspect.
Two things.
Oh, sorry, no, it was Lou then me. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I wasn't here. I was out of town when the last one was brought up, about those leaves and a few other things. I got great problems. I really have. Here's the situation that we have 2 council members that are gone to Victoria, which is fine.
Councilor Sikora, though, the issue that was raised was simply how we're getting the information. The debate will be on the 8th of July.
Fair enough, because I got great problems with the way it is.
Okay, May.
2 things. I've had actually a fair number of people asking about this, and then someone brought it up in a group discussion last week. People are talking about, well, it's our democratic right to do this, that, and the other thing, and they're all talking about other areas down at Metro. Everybody's lost someone. And I said, well, we lost 2, but we're democratic about it. We lost 1 to the NDP and 1 to the Liberals. So we haven't really changed much, have we? We've lost 1 to each side, and of course everybody started to laugh about that. So I thought that was an interesting comment on the democratic process. But did everyone receive an email from the Canadian Federation of Taxpayers about suggesting that the electoral dates for municipal and provincial be together in the same month or something? Yes. And in the future, and then that would stop. People would have to choose where they're going to go, and it would stop coming into this situation. And I actually think that's worth looking into. I think it has some merit. So perhaps maybe we want to talk about that at some time and move it forward to UBCM if we decide that we would like to do that.
But it's not part of the question that's before us.
No, I'm just bringing it up because it was information.
With the leave of the chair, I can provide a partial response to that because I think it can guide future actions. There's kind of 2 elements to that. One is changing the length of term for council in order to meet the length of term for the province. That would require a 1-year increase, and then matching up the dates to be in accordance with each other. As some members of council may recall, UBCM just went through that policy debate as part of the provincial work, and in fact UBCM changed their previous policy position, which was 4 years. It doesn't address the concordance of dates question. Right. And in a vote at UBCM, it was moved to stick with 3 years. It was a close vote, almost 50-50. I think they had to go to a standing vote because it was so close and reflected possibly a bit of a rural-urban split. Yes. But it has been a matter before UBCM's attention. So.
And I understand that, but I think with this new wrinkle in it, it's not a bad idea to send it back because some of the small rural places, if they lose members, that's $30,000-$40,000 to them, which is massive.
Don't agree, just disagree. Wanted to just give that update.
Yeah. Anecdotally, it seems that those communities of 5,000 and 3,000 would prefer a 2-year term rather than a 4-year term. It's almost like serving on strata council in some ways. So therefore, the 50-50 split.
Now we're debating it, are we?
That it was specific to the question of the letter. This was about whether or not this week gets added to the decision on July the 8th. So as I was saying, it seems like local governments, for representing about 10% of the population of BC, were against the 4-year term, and 90% were in favor. But that's not how UBCM works. It works on head count.
Individual vote.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other information related to the gathering of information for July 8th? Nothing. Thank you very much, Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, I had a phone call from a resident a couple of weeks ago about Riverview, what's happening with the Riverview lands, and concern just the upkeep of the grounds. And we have a Riverview advisory committee meeting tomorrow, so I'm going to be showing these slides, and I just wanted council to have a look and see. There's about 7 here. You can roll through them. Just what the state of the grounds is right now. This is from a variety of different locations throughout the grounds. In some places, this grass is up to, when I went through, it was almost up to your waist. You can see by the picnic table here. And this one, I know the flags are at half-mast for a different reason, but I thought I just took this because it shows the entranceway and it just shows the height of the grass. I think there's one more here as well. Just this is what the grounds are looking like. And I didn't really sort of intend this for just other than that we're going to talk about this tomorrow. There may be some recommendations come from the committee. They may, ask us to write letters or something. But because this is going to be being discussed tomorrow, it's just more for everybody's information. There's just what's going on there, and if you have a chance to drive by and look for yourself.
I drove by, and I'm absolutely insulted that the province would leave these lands. They have kept the grass cut, and they have sort of tended the millions of dollars worth of trees and plants that we have on Riverview grounds. They, of course, have neglected the buildings, but, I mean, at least it didn't look like just a derelict big field. And I'm really incensed about this because I think in their mind, maybe the shabbier it gets, the quicker we'll be happy to get rid of it. And all it does is just keep my resolve up. I just think this is really, really bad. It's really an insult to the community that this big a piece of land, which people go by every day, it just should look better.
Okay. Well, I'm of the same opinion. This is This is really unfortunate because we actually apply standards of maintenance to properties across the city.
Yes, we do.
We don't have any authority, I suspect, to apply a standards of maintenance bylaw to our senior level of government, but we apply it to all the rest of the city, and that's largely to maintain the order of the city, the feeling that the city is being taken care of. There is I have some concern here, and I'll ask our fire chief. In about a month, this grass will become dry grass of some height. I assume at that point it will have to be cut, or else a conflagration could result going through all of the heritage buildings. Now, granted, they are cutting the grass right near the buildings, probably in order to be able to argue that at least that way the fire wouldn't be able to make it to the building. But I think this is just inappropriate. I think this is a shame. I recognize the extremely high cost of maintaining this jewel of a property, even if you don't take care of the buildings that aren't occupied. But this is a real challenge, I think, for the whole city. I've got Lou, Terry, and then back to Brad.
The provincial government, we gave them some kind of a report on this Riverview lands, and they're doing a study. Well, they've been studying it now for a couple of years. And I wonder when they're going to finish doing the study, what should happen.
Well, they reported the study back to us.
Pardon?
They reported it back to us. We got the study.
Reported back to us?
Yeah. They came to, yes, with this.
Okay.
Study's finished.
And what to say, leave it alone?
Well, the study actually, that's included in some of the discussions that are happening now, is how do you move forward with the protection of those buildings that have heritage value?
Exactly.
But that's not the issue. The issue here isn't the heritage buildings.
Well, I think that there's many, many uses we can put on this land without developing it for high rises and residential and a few other things. There's many, many uses that would be good for the community. And I'll be bringing up one later on. Thank you.
Terry.
Yes, it's the Heritage Conservation Plan, I think, is what we spent a lot of time on the last year and a half. A lot of input from the city, from residents around here, and actually residents from Metro. And then that plan was given to us in a draft. We commented on that, and then a final Heritage Conservation Plan was then made. And it was then my understanding that the provincial government would then move forward, we hoped, on the Heritage Conservation Plan. And I'm wondering if there's anybody at the city staff that could tell us whether or not the city has been in touch with the provincial government on moving forward with the Heritage Conservation Plan, what the province might be intending, and if any progress has been made, and about whether or not this is part of the Heritage Conservation Plan. Any first steps?
Michelle's been in touch.
Yes, I know Michelle has been in touch, and so I want to know if she can report to us about what she's been learning from the provincial government about what their intentions are about enacting any of the provisions of the Heritage Conservation Plan, and about whether or not how they justify this letting the grass grow.
Yes, Your Worship. Jim McIntyre and I did meet with some provincial staff last week regarding the immediate actions that the province had identified in the Heritage Conservation Plan. They'd outlined 6 immediate actions. With respect to the grass, I did mention that to them, as Councillor Nicholson had mentioned it to me. And it is a cost-cutting measure. They spend a fair amount of money on landscaping. So what I was told is they were not going to be cutting the grass within 6 feet of the occupied building. So they'll cut sort of a perimeter of 6 feet around the occupied ones, but any that are vacant. They are planning on cutting it 2 or 3 times during the summer, but there was no sort of schedule on that. I did mention to them about Tree Fest, that, you know, there is a new manager that's managed it from Shared Services BC, and so I wanted to make sure he was aware that we have our annual Tree Fest. And that perhaps the grass could be cut for that. So.
Are you able to tell us about, since we're talking about the Heritage Conservation Plan, any of the things that the province is discussing right now with the city about what their intentions are?
Well, there's a number of different action items. So if I could just run through them.
I think the public deserves to hear.
Okay, one is around a communication strategy. That was their first item. And they are engaging a communications consultant. As I had mentioned, that both council and the public was very interested in what was happening now at Riverview as well as any future plans. BC Housing has set up a website for Riverview and what they're doing. It's bchousing.org, and you can find that. The second thing was around stabilization strategies, and they are undertaking a few things there. They're putting some protection acrylic film on the windows, the lower windows of the Hay Building and the Santa Lawn buildings to protect those windows. And they're repairing and replacing some of the damaged brickwork on Crease Clinic. They are hiring an engineering consultant to look at fire protection in the vacant buildings, and I know our fire department has been working with them on that. They're also looking at some of the non-building elements. Apparently there's some deteriorating rock walls around the property, and they're looking at engaging a consultant to see how they're going to maintain those. And then they're going to be undertaking some environmental remediation work under the Transportation Services building, and that's going to include demolishing that building so that they can remediate the soil and for environmental purposes around that building. The third thing was that they were going to do a high-level condition survey of the character-defining elements. And so what they're doing is some detailed building condition assessment studies on 44 of the buildings. I believe that's all the buildings. They've mentioned that they were doing them on all the buildings. And then the results of those studies will be posted on that BC Housing website. So at the end of August, they figure they'll have all those condition assessments done. And then they will start on some reuse feasibility studies. That was the point 4, doing some feasibility studies on the reuse of the buildings. The number 5 was on commencing the development of the land use plan. And they are just starting now on a process, looking at a process. They did mention the letter that Your Worship sent to the Minister back in October when they finished the Heritage Conservation Plan about Council wanting to have an integral role in that planning process. And they did mention that they wanted to engage Council through that. So they weren't ready. They didn't have anything prepared yet. They're just starting on that process. And that was about it, I think.
Well, this is some really good news then. This is finally some progress being made. There's been a lot of talk around this table for as long as I've been on it for around this subject, and certainly the Heritage Conservation Plan. We didn't really know what would come of that, whether or not that would just sit on a shelf and gather some dust. But we're now learning that the provincial government is taking some of the points, some of the major points from the Heritage Conservation Plans, and enacting them to take. So I think that's good news. And one of the things you said at the end that I hadn't heard before was they are going to be starting to look at reuse of some of the buildings. You said that.
Yes.
And so, my goodness. Okay, so there's progress all around here. Progress on the conservation and progress on looking ahead to how this. incredibly valuable and important site can be reused. And I think that's good news. And I'm so glad that we were able to share that with everybody today. Thanks.
Sorry, I'll just ask if Jim has anything to add, because he was in attendance as well.
Mr. Mack.
I think Michelle did an excellent job of covering off the main points. I arrived a little bit late for the meeting at traffic, but no, it is encouraging. There are some positive steps. Mind you, this was a preliminary staff-to-staff level, some ideas back and forth. So what we urged them was, certainly please meet with them, give them our reaction, give them our suggestions, but to them to provide formal communication to the city of Coquitlam so we could then relay that on to council so it can be part of the public record. And I think that they will follow up on that. We talked about a couple of different ideas and some options around the land use planning for the site. I explained how our citywide official community plan is structure and how that might fit in or not. So we left them with some options, and we'll see what they come back with in terms of a planning process. But Michelle, so we did remind them, the council was on record of wanting to be closely involved in that process.
May I ask this on a point of clarification, as Arlen asked? Okay. We had asked that the Heritage Conservation Plan be read in conjunction with the concept plan. So when you were talking to them, did they include the concept plan for redevelopment on the brownfield?
Yes.
Or are we just looking for them to come in and fluff something up and then put houses on the rest of it?
No, they definitely referred to the future of Riverview, our document, and they're well aware of that document. Yeah, I
Thank
think.
you very much.
Okay. Got, that was Terry Neal.
Thank you. I'm trying my best to be just as cheerful about this as Terry.
Yes.
But I don't think I'm going to succeed. Cutting 2 or 3 times a year. Does that mean around the buildings 2 or 3 times a year, or like maintaining that 6-foot perimeter on that basis, or cutting the entire place 2 or 3 times a year?
I think they're going to cut the whole lot 2 or 3 times. They're just going to let parts of it grow longer than others. But we are hoping to, as Jim asked them to put in an email format or written format to us exactly what they're doing there. And as soon as we get that, we'll pass it along.
Okay, we're waiting for that. The phrase that was in my mind a year ago is there solid as never before, and that's the concept of demolition by neglect.
That's what it is.
And the other point that I observed, besides seeing how long the grass was, I talked to an electrician who does work there every year and has for a number of years, and every year he gets an assignment in May to inspect a bunch of connection boxes that are underground that may have suffered some damage over the winter. Or I'm not an electrician, I don't entirely understand, but normally for years it's been in May you get the order to do the work. It has to be completed and reported out by the end of July. The firm he's with is still waiting and asking when it's going to happen, and they're not getting any answers. And that raises my concerns
We should ask
to
for
a
that.
further level.
We should ask for that. It's safety.
So we don't require electrical maintenance.
We do now.
Well,
Okay.
it's simply, to my mind, further indication of I'll remain as positive as I can possibly be, and I'll be watching for the actual actions that seem to have now been further planned. Although to some degree, I hear some of what I hear you saying is they're planning to plan. Thank you.
Planned demolition.
Thank you. Craig.
Yeah, as I said, I wanted to bring this to council's attention. I was aware of the meetings and that have taken place between our staff and the provincial government, and we look forward to that report tomorrow to the committee. Yes, the phrase demolition by neglect is now becoming common around when we're discussing Riverview. And one of the other phrases that I've been using quite often in discussing Riverview is the need for a plan today. And this, when the Heritage Conservation Plan and we started talking about, we were talking something in the future. And to me, the future of Riverview begins today, or in this case, a couple of months ago. And I've often asked, what is the immediate plan? And what I'm hearing is we're planning to start looking at things, but the grass is 18 inches tall today. And I think the message has to be that there has to be some ongoing maintenance. And I'm concerned that the buildings are not being looked after while we plan for the future. The demolition by neglect, you often hear when talking about buildings that first the lawn goes, then the weeds come in, and that's followed by people who don't repair their buildings, and then the graffiti, and it's just one thing leads to another. And when properties are well cared for and they look nice, they tend to have more respect in the neighborhood. And I'm just worried that we are creating a look for Riverview that just says, it's over, we've left town. And that's the look that I'm seeing here, and that concerns me. And I really think we have to communicate to the province that while we're looking for a long-term solution and planning for the future, we have to care for the grounds in those buildings today. And while it may not be possible to keep the grounds as manicured as it was in its heyday, clearly we're making hay here. I mean, this is really becoming a problem. Yeah, thank you.
Coming up, payday.
Terry, I thought
Here's the headline.
We are nothing if we're not quotable. Actually, my biggest challenge with this is not so much the grass, but the fact that when you go on the site now, and I go on there for an hour or two on a weekend or something, and you'll find, you used to find that you'd be interrupted by Plaid and security trying to figure out why you're there, and if you took out your camera, they would tell you you're not allowed to shoot pictures, and you shoot them anyway because... But today, Pladen is not there, and so the security, at least I didn't see them. And
were there, the day I was taking this
they were there?
I didn't see security there.
Because if they decide that these buildings are not worth being secure, then we'll end up with the graffiti, we'll end up with the other damage, and
a fire or a flood.
It won't take long. And I absolutely, I think that I was encouraged by the fact that they were going down the concept of a heritage plan. Demolition by delay would be just as bad as demolition by neglect, and I think we just got to get an answer very quickly. And so I'm going to contact BC Housing. I know some people there, and we'll contact the minister again now that the minister is sworn in. And it's time to make sure that they all understand that this is an absolutely vital condition of this council, and that May Reid is ready to go to Ottawa or go to Victoria to speak on our behalf, and that should scare them enough.
Go take it to Kelowna in the next 2 weeks,
It's
Your Worship.
disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. That's the headline. It's disgusting.
You? I don't disagree.
And I'm trying to be nice about it.
Okay. I think it was consensus that we proceed to contact the provincial government and express our
Dismay.
deep dismay.
Your Worship, that's the final other business item and the end of this agenda.
We'll adjourn.
We'll adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
I